I think there was a comment earlier that a good doctor knows what he doesn't know, or she knows, and goes to ask for help. And I also think that it's really imperative that everybody understands the concept of the pessimistic meta-induction theory, which states that everything we know now in medicine will be different later. So we can't get overly dogmatic in what we know today, because it will change. It always has. So I'm going to give a brief talk here on the intersection of empathy and technology, which is kind of my passion, is where does this intersection? We're still humans. It would be hard to ask a computer about death because a computer's never died before. And often humans need to talk to humans about end-of-life issues because they know that doctor, that clinician has either experienced it or lately. So in Silicon Valley, where I come from, there's a culture of move fast and break things. And that was a famous statement by Mark Zuckerberg. And Uber and all these companies are just trying to throw technology at a problem and try to break it and see what comes out of it, and maybe something great comes out of it. I think there's a fear and an imperative for us in the medical world to really get our hands around this, because the taxi industry didn't see it coming and in the US, and now they're all going out of business. So there are models where technology does quickly and suddenly disrupt things. But I believe that in healthcare we have to move slow and not kill people, which is my mantra using technology, is to be a little bit more thoughtful. I remind all the digital health entrepreneurs out there that when you look at the technology world, things go viral. In healthcare, the only thing that goes viral is viruses, actually. Nothing goes viral in health IT. It goes bacterial or maybe fungal. But when it does go, you can't get rid of fungi, right? So if you're in, you're in. It's just you have to be patient. And so I'm happy that we're speeding up the pace of medical innovation. We're going from 1 mile an hour to 2 miles an hour. And by the way, that's twice as fast. We should all embrace that. But what took 14 years will now take 7. It's still really slow, and it's gonna be slow. I mean, if we're lucky, we'll get to 3 miles an hour in a couple years. But healthcare is just too big of a industry. It's too bogged down in they can't get out of their own way because they've created so many systems. I say that it's a hairball, and people think that technology is the conditioner and you can comb the hairball with technology, but you can't. It is just too complicated, and it's a massive system redesign issue that we need to think about versus just sprinkling technology on a broken system and that will magically make it work. So I'm a big fan of linguistics and semiotics, and the words that we use become the house that we live in. And I feel like the words that are used in medicine often put us in a box that we can't even get out of. Words like readmission. Is anybody familiar with the word readmission? So I talk to CEOs in the United States. I'm like, well, readmission is a dehumanized term for somebody that just had a massive failure of treatment and the system failed them. So why don't we rename a readmission to hospital treatment failure? Why don't we change it to something that actually says what it is, not some other term that kind of like makes it a cell in a spreadsheet and you got to get that number down. And so what happens is a lot of people at high levels, I find, look at spreadsheets and say that number's too big, it needs to go lower, that number's too small, it needs to go higher, and they forget the point that these numbers are attached to people. And so we really need to be careful about the words we use, and I want to spend a minute. I got in a fight with the secretary of the HHS in the United States about the difference between consumers and patients. I've never seen a consumer in the intensive care unit, okay? And the reason is that consumers have free will. They can do stuff if they want to. They can decide not to. They have full agency and they trust themselves to make decisions. Whether they're right or they're wrong, they believe that to be so. They have unlimited options to do things. Their logic models, their orientation psychologically is they're excited. They're excited to do something. And they're adding something to their baseline. I had a glass of water. I didn't have that before I had it. Now, patients, on the other hand, they don't have free will. They have tethered will. If you're nauseous, if you're in pain, if whatever your problem is, you have to make a decision. You can't not. And even deciding not to take the pill is a decision. But the truth is you have limited options. If you have hip pain, you're a pill, it's surgery, it's something. So you have limited options. You have tethered will. You have to outsource a lot. Now, I know we all want to have the trust and the ability to make the most sense of our own health, but when you're sick in bed, the next time you're sick in bed with the virus, shivering and feeling like crap, I just want to think of how smart you are then and how great of a decision maker you are then. So what people do when they're sick and in medicine is they have to outsource their trust and agency into somebody else. And whether it's a computer, and maybe that's the future, right now it's people, because people can listen and they have ears and they can understand. Sensors don't have ears. They have different ears, they have digital ears, but and they also are oriented around anxiety. And anxiety usually comes in the form of existentialism. Uh-oh, I hope this isn't cancer. I hope I'm not gonna die, you know? And so the logic models when you're anxious are very different than when you're excited. And lastly, you're returning to baseline. You're not adding anything to your life. If you're in pain, you want to get rid of that pain. If you're nauseous, you want to get rid of that nausea. So the whole concept of being a patient and a consumer, and I fear that when we talk about consumerizing medicine, we are going to put ourselves in a box that we're going to be really hard to get out of, because we're going to conflate things all over the place. But I'll skip really quick to Act 1, Scene 1. You've just been given a diagnosis, okay? So through the lens which I look at medical care, I try to get outside of my own self as a physician, and I try to put myself in the patient's view. What are they hearing when I talk to them? So I try to be two people at the same time. It's hard. It's cognitive empathy. And so when you get a new diagnosis and a new treatment, the question is that you are the protagonist of your healthcare movie. And the movie's going to play out over time, and how do you want your movie to end? I'm guessing you want a good ending, right? You want a movie with a good ending. You're the main character. You don't want it to be drove off in the ditch. You want to fall in love and have, live happily ever after. But what we don't know today in medicine is who's the director, who's the producer, who's the supporting cast, what are everybody's lines, where do the props come and go, how do we know we're doing well inside and outside of the hospital? Today, it's no news is good news. Hope is our strategy. And the truth is news is data. And that's like saying no data is good data, right? The truth is no news is no news. Good news is good news. And we have to be really clear that by just sending someone home and not knowing how they're doing, that's a problem. And that was the problem I was trying to solve. So Blue Shield and Blue Cross did a big study in the United States on how do we get behavior change. Now, if you want to get patients engaged, right, you have to empower them. And to empower them means you have to listen to them. There needs to be some empathy in there so that they feel heard, they feel valued, they feel included in their process. They do want to participate. Patients do want the best. If you ask every patient, would you like the best outcome the fastest? Who's going to say no? If you ask their physician, would you like your patient to get the best outcome the fastest? Who's going to say no? So you have two actors with the same set of goals, and yet it doesn't happen all the time. Why? So what they found is that in order to get empowerment, you have to have a sense of connectedness and continuity, right? And so we have mobile phones now, so at least we're connected all the time, and we could theoretically have continuity with somebody that knows what's going on in our medical journey. I also would add trust in here, and I'll get to trust at the end. So I studied philosophy as an undergrad, and then you become a doctor and you study a lot of science. So philosophers want to get the question right. That's all they care about. You get to the answer later, but get to the question right. And scientists want the answer right. They hopefully got the question right, but once they have a question, they're going deep for the answer. And as I was thinking about that on the plane on the way over here, I was thinking, God, there's only 25% chance you get this right in medicine. And oftentimes, whether it's a policy decision, whether it's a actual medical question you want to ask, is it the right question? And the truth is you can have the right question and get the wrong answer, and you can have. So anyway, I just think that it's really important that as we go through any statement we're making, ask yourself, is it the right question? And ask 10 questions about that question to really kind of challenge yourself and get out of your own comfort zone, because it's really easy to become dogmatic with what you think the answer is to the question that could be wrong. And then, no one can disprove it. So real quick on innovation and leadership, it's better to be curious than right. I was with a CEO the other day, and he said, I fire people who want to come into my room and want to be right. I want them to be curious. I tell people you need to give people the ability to have truth-seeking behavior. Let them ask hard questions. They're not challenging you. They're just wanting to understand. And I tell people all the time, ask when you go into a hospital or anywhere you go, say, why do we do it this way? And then when they answer, say, and what do you mean by that? And then when they answer, say, and what do you mean by that? And eventually you'll find out they don't know why they do it that way. And it's just some legacy thing. But people get stuck on that. In medicine, we have morbidity and mortality rounds. And I presume everybody knows what that is in here, but if you don't, it's where at the end of my father was a surgeon, so I sat in on a lot of those as a kid, is the doctor say, I made a mistake, the patient died because of my mistake, and here's what I want to teach all you guys, the other surgeons in the room, so that mistake doesn't happen again. Or the person didn't die, but they had a bad complication. And it's a private space where these people cannot judge each other, because it is a high-intensity, kind of a fraught environment when you're doing surgery. Things can go wrong. It doesn't mean it's malpractice. It means, it's whether bad luck or whatever. But we don't do that in medicine at the managerial level. There's no, hey, let's talk about the failure we made and break it down and talk about it and see what we can all learn from that. So we hide from our failures. We run to our triumphs. We need to give people time and space to think. And if you have a brainstorm, like any physical storm in the world, you have to clean it up afterwards. And if you're going to have a brainstorming session, you have to pre-program time for that group to meet ongoing for another few months, so they can sift through it and really understand what that whiteboarding session and that great session was. Because one brainstorming session with a lot of ideas dies really quick. It's also really hard to change a carburetor on a moving car, because healthcare, you can't just stop it, have a retreat, and then come back to it after you've all had a great time to think. So that's one of the other real challenges in innovating healthcare, is this train's moving fast, and you just can't add a wheel onto it because it's a faster wheel. So false innovation is the shiny object syndrome. Everybody thinks that this is great. Let's do that. There's death by point solutions. And John Muir, a famous naturalist in California, said when you tug on a single thing in nature, you realize it's connected to everything else. And in healthcare, it's the same thing. So if you just have a point solution, you may think it's great, but 3 people away from that thing, you didn't realize you screwed them up pretty hard. And you don't even know it, because you didn't even know they existed. So you really have to think holistically about anything you do. A bunch of pilots, bad idea. You actually should pay for things and have meaningful measurements. Don't do unpaid pilots, because you don't have any skin in the game and you don't care. It's an experiment that you can watch do. As soon as you put some money on the table, then you kind of have a vested interest in making it work, or at least learning with them. Little companies really want to do the right thing. And if you don't want to do it, tell them no. Like HealthLoop used to be a small company. And the truth is that, people would say no, and then they would be nice, but they really wouldn't tell us why. And help them out. Tell them no. And no can be better than yes. Novation, which is the opposite of innovation, is like, here are the reasons why it won't work, and that will require money we don't have, and you need to prove that it works first here. And this is like old school. Nobody should be saying this ever. You should lose that orientation. Real quick, I know I have 1 minute left, and I'll fly real quick. Applications have these dimensions. This was a study commissioned by IMS, and they inform, they instruct, they record, they display, they guide, they remind, they communicate. If I ask all of you guys on your phone, you can only keep one button on your phone, what would it be? And if I asked you what 3 apps do you use the most, what would they be? They're all communication apps. When the internet turned on in 1997, I was in San Francisco. Everyone was asking, what's the killer app for this internet thing going to be? It was email. It was communication. 2007, the second internet wave that came on, the killer app of all this connectedness was social media. Okay? Communication, communication, communication. So when people say, what's the killer app going to be in healthcare? It's the same thing. We're human. All we want to do is communicate. And real briefly, so I started this company called HealthLoop, and this is not a commercial, but there's some data on 55,000 patients. When you ask people, so people said, oh, old people aren't going to use it, young people aren't going to use it, no one's going to use it. 70% of people at these age groups use it. And not only do they use it, but they use it all the time. The engagement rates from 3 weeks pre-op to 23 weeks post-op, they're still 65%. If a patient gets a message, hey, your doctor wants to check in with you, going back to the movie script, and it tells you, it knows where you are today, knows where your time orientation is, it says, here's what you need to know today. And by the way, how are you doing? Yeah, I care about you, I'm including you. This is this digital empathy concept, and I can show you where you are progressing in the context of everything else. People like that. So we have to leave the make and sell attitude. We have to go to sense and respond. We actually have to listen to patients and try to understand what their journey is. Their journey is why we went into medicine, and we need to make their journey better. We're at a tipping point right now. I think we can get a huge impact with a little bit of action if people can kind of come together and break down their silos and try to reach across the aisle, so to speak, and work together. So my last slide is this concept of digital trust, which I think plays into empathy. And I've spent a long time thinking about what are the attributes that if you're going to be building something, anything, whenever I look at things, I say, what attributes? What are the attributes? And you have to listen to people. The first thing people want is that they want to feel heard. And even an AI might be able to do that. But if you listen to them, they will open up and tell you things they wouldn't have told you maybe because you care about them. And there needs to be context. I heard that a bunch of times today. Context matters. It needs to be relevant. And literacy is really, really critical. I tell people, no more acronyms. Don't use acronyms. It's really bad. Just get them out of your life. and just say the whole word. Spend the extra eighth of a second and use the whole word. But you're not saving time. You're not. You're actually saying what the words mean, and it has a much different emphasis to who you're talking to. I did a chatbot thing, a health chatbot, and it said, you have ankylosing spondylitis. I'm like, a patient does not know what that means. Like, we need to translate things to make them more human. Anyway, it needs to be invisible, safe, shareable, actionable, responsive, anticipatory. There needs to be fidelity, and it needs to be stable. Anyway, that's all I got. Thank you.